Joining us now in the Cipher Brief studio is Ralph Goff. We are proud to call Ralph a Cipher Brief expert. He is also a former 6-time station chief and spent his career at the Central Intelligence Agency. Ralph, thank you so much for being here with us.
Hi, Suzanne. My pleasure. Really good to see you again, particularly given the events of the last 12 hours or so.
It's hard to count the hours, right? Thank you so much. I think this took almost everybody by surprise. There were a few people in the inner planning stages. We now know some of the details of the operation and how long people may have known this was coming, Ralph. But, you know, given your past experience and in very senior roles at the CIA, really kind of understanding how operations work around the world, if you're sitting in Tel Aviv right now, what is your primary focus at this point in time after these strikes have already obviously been launched? What are you thinking now?
Yeah, so I mean, my top two priorities would be, one is battle damage assessment, right? Got to find out, you know, what is the extent of damage to these three facilities, right? Were they obliterated, as some in the administration say, or were they heavily damaged, as others in the administration say, right? What is the extent of that damage? And also, you know, reaffirming that what was bombed was what we wanted to bomb, meaning, you know, the enrichment program. And, you know, I don't know where the weaponization program, elements of the weaponization program were stored or kept or being conducted, or, you know, at this point, the Iranians claim they weren't pursuing weaponization, but, you know, back when they were looking at it, presumably there are databases, there are facilities where they worked on this. So, you know, has any of that been hit as well, since weaponization was what was the key to prevent for as a policy goal for the administration. Secondly, you know, you're looking at, okay, what's next, right? This is the question everyone's asking, all the talking heads all day long, all morning long on the TV news shows, right? You know, what's next? How does Iran respond, right? You have some, you know, the Iranian foreign minister saying that, you know, that diplomacy has been, you know, hijacked, and, you know, not that they were engaging in any ways, but easy for him to say, right? So, you know, do the hardliners, who are no doubt urging an attack or urging attacks, right, payback, or they're more moderates, although it's hard to define what an Iranian moderate is these days, right? Are they counseling, no, let's have restraint, right? Is it somewhere in between? Or are there others saying, okay, let's go to the table and negotiate with President Trump like he's offered, right? I would imagine very few of those voices, although I'll bet amongst the Iranian people, there's probably a huge desire for this thing to be over, and a huge desire for the government to go and sit down and negotiate some sort of way out of this. You know?
Mm-hmm. You know, regime change has been something that's been talked about, I mean, since President Trump, since Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu brought it up. They've been encouraging this. And everybody seems to be on the same page on this, Ralph, that without a really strong opposition leader in Iran, it would be very difficult to start something that you can't finish. There are multiple examples throughout history of something like that going wrong. What is your sense of what it would take in Iran to bring about regime change? Would it be more than just a strong opposition leader at this point?
A strong opposition leader obviously is one of the key elements to some sort of successful change in government, right? The other is the will of the people, which, you know, the Iranians have shown periodically that, you know, they have the will to rise up against a fanatically brutal regime. They've done it numerous times in the past. So, you know, we can't, you know, exclude that they could rise up again and take on the regime, you know, which takes, I think, great bravery and you know, tremendous sacrifice on the part of the long-suffering Persian people. You know, that said, the Trump administration has reiterated, and Bibi himself has said, you know, regime change is not the goal here, right? I think we have to take the president at his word that he says the door is open for the current regime, right, to maintain legitimacy and maintain power if they come to the table and negotiate, right? I mean, many of us, particularly who served in the Middle East and Iraq and places like that, right? I mean, we look at I have very mixed personal views on the bombing of the facilities. On the one hand, I think it was a fantastic opportunity that the president took advantage of, right? A very weak Iran in terms of its ability to defend itself. And, you know, we look at payback for this. Goes back to the bombing in the Marine Corps barracks in 1983, the bombing in the American embassy. Iran was behind those, right? The RGC. Then you had during the invasion of Iraq and the occupation period afterwards, right? You had Shia militias who were trained, equipped, and outfitted by the IRGC attacking U.S. troops, right? These extremely deadly, explosively formed projectile IEDs that killed and maimed thousands of U.S. service people, right? I, for one, those things were terrifying, and it's good to see some payback for that against the IRGC, right? So a lot of this has been a long time in coming. And so, for me, it's kind of like mixed emotions to see this. And now, as far as regime change, clearly this is the regime, the same regime that was behind all those problems and behind arming proxies and behind threatening Israel's existence for the last, 4 or 5 decades. It kind of seems hard to think that you'd want that regime to stay in place. But again, regime change has not been the stated goal of any of these operations.
Yeah, there are always stated goals, and there are always, I think broadly we assume goals that aren't always stated, which, we've seen carried out. I'm wondering, if you're sitting in Tel Aviv right now too, you've got to be thinking about Israel as a target, as a potential target of a more limited, maybe more tactical form of retaliation.
Sure.
And you're thinking about, Lebanese Hezbollah, which to the north has really been degraded significantly because of Israel's prior attacks. They took out a number of leaders in various ways, including the very, I guess the right word is ingenious or creative attack by, putting explosives in their pagers. I mean, they've been very creative in trying to sort of wipe out what's left of Iran's proxies. Are they still a threat, do you think? Or what other threats might exist if you're actually sitting in Israel today?
Yeah, look, the lethal creativity of Mossad is, pretty unmatched, I think. So, this is particularly why this window was open for the U.S. administration to take on the nuclear sites, was that these proxies, particularly Lebanese Hezbollah had been wounded so severely. I have to say, time and again, we in the West, we've kind of, I think, underestimated the impacts and the effects that the Israelis have been able to create. I mean, from a low point where they were surprised and attacked by Hamas, right, October 7th, right, to a high point where they've decimated not just Hamas, but they've decimated the Hezbollah leadership based on, just unbelievably accurate intelligence and the ability to put, bombs on the targets that they identified in the leadership, right? So these proxies have really been weakened, and the investment that Iran made in these proxies over the decades has just been wasted. I think that actually might be a sore point with the Iranian people. Say, okay, we have gone without, we have faced sanctions, we have suffered economically while you, funded the proxies and while you, funded this enrichment program and while you're threatening to fund a new bomb program. And what did it get us, right? Got us nothing. Our proxies, in our hour of need, our proxies have deserted us. The enrichment program is buried under tons of rock, in the desert. So, this could lead to a great deal of unrest amongst the Iranian people who have been chafing for so long. And so, if I'm sitting here in Tel Aviv, I'm looking at all this and figuring, okay, other ways that the West can signal, these people that, hey, it is time, right? The West is waiting for you to rise, right? And other ways for us to signal Lebanese Hezbollah, hey, if you're thinking of lashing out at Israel, stand down on that, because now that we've bombed, targets in Iran, we won't hesitate to bomb Hezbollah targets as well, right? So stay out of it. So, there's a lot of behind the scenes messaging, and there's a great need for intelligence to be collected on the ground there, both by my former colleagues in the agency and by my former colleagues in the Israeli services.
Yeah, quite a bit. Their task is certainly not easing. I would say, if anything, it might be doubling down. There's a lot that we do at the Cipher Brief too, focused on gray zone operations with a great group of your former colleagues as well. And it seems like when you don't have the power to go toe to toe with the military, either the U.S. or Israel, in a case like this, that gray zone operations may be a huge opportunity for you. Can you kind of talk us through what some of those gray zone operations could look like?
Sure. I mean, the Iranians, the IRGC, they were already involved in planning and executing gray zone operations, right? For the past few years, IRGC-funded groups have been trying to track down and assassinate Iranian dissidents living abroad, including here in the United States, right? We had some attempts in the United States against dissidents here, right? So clearly the IRGC has some sort of network out there for gray zone operations. And let's not rule out cyber. Let's, got to add cyber to the mix too as a gray zone operation, right? What can the Iranians come after, in the coming days here and weeks to, score some points in the revenge category using cyber, right? So it would be careless to think that they don't have options in the gray zone, right? They've been hurt, they've been pushed back, but they still have capabilities there. So it's going to take, I think, a great deal of vigilance on the part of U.S. law enforcement and U.S. intelligence, and close coordination with our allies to track those groups or those individuals who we already have some sort of knowledge on as being involved in supporting Iranian gray action. Because we do know, we've foiled, with the Israelis and with us, we have foiled, countless plots against Israeli citizens, American citizens, cockamamie assassination plots against, U.S. officials, right? The Iranians vowed revenge for, Soleimani's death, the IRGC commander, and they still haven't really achieved that, right? So we can't think that just because they failed today doesn't mean that they would fail in future attempts. So really is a time where we really have to up our game on the defensive side.
You hit on exactly what I was going to ask you kind of as we close out, thoughts on this, Ralph, and that was that there have been attacks previously. Israel has killed Hamas leaders in Tehran, where there have been threats of retaliation that never really materialized. What are you going to be looking for next in terms of the indicators that Iran may be able to do something in response? Because as many people we've talked to have mentioned, they kind of have to do something.
Yeah. Look, I'm sure my colleagues in the intelligence world are tracking a number of IRGC operations, so they'll be looking for any sign that they're getting the go order, right? If all of a sudden prominent IRGC officials outside Iran operating undercover or operating out of Iranian missions, diplomatic missions, if all of a sudden they go to ground, right, that could be a sign that they've gone active, they've gone operational, right? So, again, working closely with our allies around the world, we're on the lookout for that, right? Looking, of course, now more than ever, our reliance on signals intelligence and on cyber intelligence will be crucial, right? What have we been tracking in terms of, deployments of, explosives or precursor chemicals or movement of weapons or movement of people, right? We're going to be tracking all that with a greater sense of urgency than maybe before.
Yeah. Ralph Goff, former senior officer with the CIA's Clandestine Operations Organization, and proud to say a Cipher Brief member. Thank you so much for joining us and for kind of providing your really unique access or insights rather into what's going on right now and how we should be thinking about it. It's very helpful for us, Ralph. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. My pleasure, Suzanne. Good to see you again.